All right, Drake. Did you see the news about Drake this week?
I did, and well, go ahead. Why don't you first tell us what happened, and then I kind of want to tell a funny story about that.
Oh yeah, so there was this guy who basically made a song, a Drake song, Drake in the Weekend, used an AI model to recreate both of their voices and created the entire song generated with AI. And it's not bad. I listened to it. Like it's a decent song. It sounds very much like them. The one artifact that I noted was the sort of strange volume thing that happened. Sometimes when it transitioned from having vocals to a little instrumental segment. I don't know if
Mhm.
you noticed this when you listened to it, but there was sort of like this little like the volume of the instrumental sort of like dipped up and down with the voices. But other than that, it sounded really good.
Yeah, no. So getting into that, you asking if I noticed it. Part of that funny story is that at Morning Brew we have like bi-weekly all hands, and at these all hand meetings, usually there will be like waiting music. So you'll get in there and somebody will play music. I get in there like 3 minutes or so, like before the meeting starts, and I'm hearing the song playing, and I'm not thinking anything of it, and it sounds pretty good. And I'm just like, oh, like yeah, this is not bad. And then I start like seeing people say, make comments about like AI is incredible, blah blah blah. And here I am, I'm thinking like they're making fun of the song, like saying it's so bad that it's like AI generated or something like that. And then it dawns on me, like, no, this is actually AI generated. So it completely fooled me. I thought it was a real song. I was blown away.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was quite good. Apparently, also the record label I think that has the rights to some of Drake's audio pushed back a little bit. They were they were not
Yeah.
happy with the AI impersonation.
Would you be happy if it sounded that good and you're kind of infringing on your artist's work? Like, what sort of precedent does that set if you're just like okay with that?
Yeah, so this is an area I'm not that familiar with. Like, I'm not sure what rights exist to voice. I know in the aftermath, right, we had Grimes come out, so Elon Musk's ex-girlfriend, wife-ish. I don't think they ever got married, but had a kid. Um, so she came out and said that anybody could create a song with her voice,
Hmm.
recreated with AI, as long as they gave her a 50-50 profit split. So that was interesting, but I don't really know what the legal right of Grimes is to be able to, put a constraint on there or not. I would imagine there's some legal rights there, but yeah, I mean it's sort of interesting, right? Like in some sense maybe it's similar to the like class action lawsuits of that are against Midjourney and stability AI because um they are training on copyrighted or potentially copyrighted like audio clips of Grimes, right?
Right.
And then generating output based on that. So on the one hand, I think there is I have read something in the distant past that I don't remember that well that was about visual appearance, right? So something about like an actor, sort of licensing their likeness,
Yeah.
and this term of likeness I think has legal significance.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, I don't know, so maybe that means that the voice is licensable. On the other hand, it seems like that would also imply that those lawsuits are destined to win, which would be interesting.
Yeah, so I actually wanted to bring up that likeness aspect of it. So in the NCAA, for a long time, student athletes weren't allowed to be paid any sort of money, and there was tons of legal battles to like oppose that. And one thing that was implemented is you're able to start profiting off your name, image, and likeness. It's called NIL. And I think, or I imagine, there's a similar precedent with some sort of like celebrity or artist where it probably, their voice at least, probably falls under that likeness category and thus is in some way protected and licensable, right? Like I would imagine that that's so, because why would you be able to protect your, your image or your name and profit off of that, but not your voice as well?
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're right. And then I'm interested if there's some sort of other legal difference between this situation. So recreating, taking an existing artist like Drake, recreating their voice based on, copyrighted audio clips, and training stability, training a stable diffusion model or a text to image model based on copyrighted images. Because it's not, there's not a likeness aspect of a particular person necessarily, but in each case, all you're doing is taking copyrighted images, training it, and creating a reproduction. So like if in those text to image lawsuits we see that there are arguments made of, the output is just learning. So I think like the people who work at Midjourney, who work at these text to image companies, they're making the argument essentially that it's just like a human brain. Like, you can look at an artist's work and be inspired by it. That
Hmm.
doesn't violate copyright. But if that argument is successful in those cases, I don't see how a reproduction of an AI voice would be any different. On the other hand, if the AI voice is copyrightable, then I don't see that, that human brain analogy working. So I think there's an interesting, maybe there's an interesting connection there, or maybe there's some additional level of IP law that will separate those two.
What is the legal definition of parody? Is it only like in the comedic or satirical sense? Like,
In what
is
it,
it at all possible that you training a model on like a voice or something like that, and the output you get based off of that is very similar to this person's voice, but in all reality or technicality, it's not that person's voice. That I'm assuming that doesn't like fall under any sort of parody law, because again, I think it needs to be satirical, but I could be wrong. And I'm curious, like, is it something where it's like, hey, listen, it's not actually this person's voice. So how is it possible that that is protected by law?
yeah, I think that's a good thing to bring up. That's interesting. I would imagine that you're right. I think that there's probably a satirical element there. Um, I I think parody probably, the satirical element. Also, parody is not usually in the same voice, right? Like if you make a parody of something, you're still dubbing it over with somebody else's voice. So maybe you're using very similar
Mm.
lyrics, but you still have a different voice. So I think like,
But
oh, go ahead.
can I was just say, can you not make the argument that the generated output is a different voice? And like, you can say you get somebody who sounds like identical, but they're a different person. Like, it doesn't, to me, it doesn't really matter like how close or how far away they are from that person's voice. It is somebody else making the voice.
That's a
And
good point.
so,
And actually, so this is interesting because I wonder, there are, impersonators,
right,
right? Like you can have a human, you can go on Upwork or Fiverr and find someone who is a
very good
very
point.
good Morgan Freeman impersonator. And so their voice may sound at this point more similar to Morgan Freeman than the AI's voice. And if that's
Mm.
true, then and that obviously doesn't violate the copyright law. So a human manipulating their own voice to impersonate someone else doesn't manipulate doesn't infringe any copyrights, any intellectual property. So if that's true, then it would have to be, if there was an issue with the AI generated voices, it would have to be on the training side,
Hmm.
which would again drop it into the same bucket as these like class action lawsuits and the Getty Images lawsuits against text to image players.
So I guess let me ask you this: like, there's two things that I'm thinking about here. One is, say I was a Brad Pitt impersonator. Now I know I'm good looking, but I'm not that good looking. But say I was, and I could make money, out in Hollywood by just like taking pictures, and people maybe know that it's not him, but it is just like I'm making money off Brad Pitt's name, image, and likeness just because I look like him. Is that something like that does exist today in one way or another? Is that something that if that person wanted to, if Brad Pitt wanted to, or his legal team wanted to, they could shut that down. Because the reason I ask is I once dated somebody who they did like princess parties, they called it. And they would basically dress up like Elsa, but they couldn't call it Elsa, obviously, because of the trademarks on it.
Right.
So characters like that are protected, but are people in the same way because they are a star. Brad Pitt is a star. His name carries weight and it has value associated with it. So if I was impersonating him and making money based off of that fact, like, is that something that is, can I go after that as Brad Pitt? I
So
feel like that's relevant because,
yeah,
like,
it is. It's the same thing. And so I guess my previous answer was presupposing the answer to that was no. I I think, perhaps you could trademark your name. If you haven't trademarked your name, I don't know what other law. Again, I'm not an expert here, so maybe there's
mhm.
something else that I'm missing here, but I'm not sure where that prohibition would come from.
But I do want to say, and I know that you were saying that, but you were saying it's more on like the training side of things. And so, knowing what I just said, if I technically view training as, say I was just like studying Brad Pitt as this impersonator, that's basically training my brain on like how he works, his mannerisms, how he talks. Like you can, I feel like, make the same argument that, hey, I'm just training off of what's out there and generating an output in the same way as like I'm physically looking at, listening to what he's doing and taking that and using that in my own way to make money.
So
Is
I think
that
I
like
think that's the
transferable?
I think that's the same argument basically that like Midjourney is making, right? They're like, hey, training is just me looking at it, and Midjourney is just a brain. I'm just looking at existing stuff, and so that's the training process. So that's their argument for why it's not infringing anything.
Mm-hmm.
And my earlier statement was just that, like, if you assume that the Brad Pitt impersonation as an action is not infringing anything. That's an assumption. I'm not sure if that's
Mm-hmm.
true. I think that's probably true, but I'm not positive.
Yeah,
If
I
that's true,
reciprocate.
though, then the only thing left is the training argument.
Right.
But it's a. I'm very interested to see how this plays out. Even with the this Drake this latest Drake thing. Is the artist who made that going to be sued? Is he going to just agree to give a
Take
percentage
it
of
down.
revenue
Yeah.
to Drake's production house? Is what exactly is going to pan out there? Is he just too small scale and it's just going to be forgotten about?
That feels like it would be a nice little bit of revenue, right? Like I could just ask for,
Yeah,
some piece of that pie and not have to do any of the work. Do you think
it's also
that?
easy to see, right? Like, I mean, as that video racks up YouTube views, the people who own rights over Drake's voice or Drake's existing copyrighted music can just look at that video and be like, maybe it's getting I'm sure they have a much better idea off the top of their head than I do of like what the CPM is for music videos on YouTube. Let's say it's a
Mhm.
dollar. And then they're like, oh, this has 1 million views. That's $1,000. Or it has 100 million views, and now it's 100,000 bucks. And they're like, well, yeah, all right, fine, we'll sue him.
Right. I wonder what that threshold is. Do you think that the initial lawsuit, whichever way it goes, is going to set that precedent, or do you think that there are different variables for different modalities of these AIs? So, what I mean by that is something like Midjourney training on images and outputting completely new images versus kind of voice synthesization. It's a tough word to say, versus something like ChatGPT, which is training on like text-based data and outputting generally text-based data. Like, do you think that there's going to be different cases for each, or do you think that one is just kind of set the precedent legally for all those different scenarios?
I would imagine that there's going to be many different cases, if for no other reason that there's a lot of like copyright law is so ambiguous. Like it's an old set of laws that has been around for a long time and has been adapted to all different forms of media. And it's not even copyright, right? But like the likeness thing, I don't think that's actually. Maybe that's copyright. Maybe that's not actually technically something else. Um, But I know, like a photographer, there are rights associated with the person being photographed. There's rights associated with the person taking the photograph, and then potentially anyone that's
Are there rights with that? Like if I
the
was
person taking or with the photograph taken of them.
yeah, because if I was just out on the street and like took a picture of a celebrity, like I think that's just it's you can take a picture of anybody if they're out in public. You lose that anonymity, right? Or that right to privacy, I think it's called.
So maybe a celebrity is a different case, but let me see here.
Because like in a public place, you have the right to videotape people, and I imagine that translates to pictures as well. And at least that I don't think that celebrity is protected under that.
Yeah, I'm not sure about a celebrity. I was thinking more of a general person. All
Okay.
right, so I looked it up just briefly here. It looks like, yeah, there's numerous things at play here. I think what I was thinking of is work for hire. So if you do something, you take a picture of someone and they've hired you to do that, then there's different rights at play there. But otherwise,
So like if I hire a photographer for my wedding, I own those pictures when they're delivered, right? Like that's
yep.
my copyright, not theirs. Once I've paid for it, yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, it looks like also apparently certain historic buildings and architectural designs have copyrights. So there might be an issue there. Like if you take a picture of those. Also, I guess that plays into, also an idea like if I take a picture of, Disney Castle,
Mm-hmm.
that Disney Castle clearly has some sort of intellectual property rights associated with it. I'm not sure if I just take a picture of that castle, if I can reproduce it. We should get a copyright lawyer to come talk
That
on the
would be really
pod.
cool. I
That would
would
be
love to
cool.
hear that, like hear their opinion on all of this. I think it's yeah, definitely we have or especially you have some base level knowledge of this stuff, but
We're getting
definitely
into
not like
territory that I'm very out of touch with, though. So,
100%. Yeah. Same here. Yeah.
but yeah, this is. I'm very curious to see what just happens with this Drake thing. There were a couple other interesting. After I saw that, I know years and years ago was playing with like automated music generation. I think roughly a year ago or a year and a half ago, I discovered this website that I wish I could remember what it was, but it was basically like 24-hour, continuous just AI generated stream of lo-fi. So those videos you go to
Yeah.
YouTube, right? And it's
Totally.
just
Yeah.
a study video. So this was just like a lo-fi AI generator. You could go to the website and it was just streaming new, lo-fi that you'd never heard before
That's incredible.
constantly. Yeah, that was pretty cool. And then I forgot about that until I saw the Drake thing. But then looking around, it looks like there's a few other interesting things. Like actually, OpenAI released this model called Jukebox back in
Mhm.
2020, and we'll have to play a clip of this over the pod when we put it on YouTube. It sounds who did you say it sounded like?
I think it's like Johnny Cash. It's very like
Yeah,
kind of country, like low vibe.
it's
Like,
also quite
yeah,
good. Like the
it's
the
very
the
good.
video or the audio quality is quite good. The voice is quite clear.
From dusty tiny, almost gone, but the little hitch tells the heart. When my toe slips, when my nail is fine.
That was pretty good, and that was released 3 years
2020.
ago,
Yeah,
which is
crazy. And
impressive.
I would be super interested because like you told me about this right before the pod and I looked at it a little bit and yeah, I'm so curious to see what this would look like if we went there and took a look today because I'm sure it's just advanced like a crazy amount.
Maybe they've been so busy with ChatGPT that they just haven't even gone back to look
They
at
put it to the
it.
wayside. They're like, this music generation stuff's for the birds.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think that's a wrap.
That's a wrap.